With all the excitement coming out with Avengers Endgame last week, I thought it'd be interesting this week to explore how billionaire, genius, playboy philanthropist Tony Stark manages his money. Hey, I'm Austin from Sale Financial Ed, and I help forward-thinking millennials get further in life faster with the money they already have. So I thought this would be a fun topic, and maybe we can learn something from it to see just how it is that Tony Stark manages his vast wealth. I'm only going to be covering Tony Stark's financials up until the end of Infinity Wars, so after Thanos' snap. I'm not touching anything to do with Endgame, so don't worry, there's no spoilers. So to set the parameters for how I'm going to be discussing this, I've swept through tons and tons of articles, information, wiki pages about Tony Stark, so there's going to be a mishmash of information here. I'll explain it as clear as I can to help you follow along. So let's talk a brief history about Tony Stark. The Stark family wealth originally started with Tony Stark's father, Howard, who built a company called Stark Industries in the early 1900s. So we learn a lot about Howard Stark in Captain America: The First Avenger.
I had some ideas about the uniform.
Whatever you want, pal.
Now fast forward all the way to Captain America: Civil War, and in 1991 we find that the Winter Soldier kills Howard Stark, at which point Obadiah Stane, who is introduced in the first Iron Man, takes over as interim CEO of Stark Industries. Now at this point in 1991, Tony is about 21 years old. So what we could assume at this point is that Tony likely got inheritance from his father. Who knows how much that is, and I'm not really entering that into the total, but this is where I'm going to be starting my analysis for Tony's worth, considering this is where he takes over CEO of Stark Industries, and I've cleverly tried to figure out how much Stark Industries was worth at that time and how it's grown into the future to 2018. So the way I tried to figure out the value of Stark Industries is because it's roughly modeled after a company in the US called Lockheed Martin, which is essentially a weapons company that does a lot of production for the States. I projected, just by basing it off of Lockheed Martin, that the company had a market cap, or it was estimated to be worth about $2.87 billion at that time, which works out to be about $9.56 a share, assuming that there's 300 million shares outstanding. So I add that as part of Tony's wealth, the 17% of $2.87 billion that the company is worth. And I'm basing this 17% assumption off of Jeff Bezos, who is obviously the CEO of Amazon. Over the period that Tony is the CEO for 19 years of Stark Industry, I'm assuming that he's taking a very large salary of $10 million per year, with inflation of 2% per year, and that's probably lowballing it. But I assume that he earns about $233 million. Now, not a whole lot happens over these 2 decades in the MCU, but once 2008 occurs, when Iron Man starts and the whole of the MCU begins, there's lots to talk about. Now in 2011, after Tony gives the CEO position to Pepper Potts,
it's you. It's always been you.
Forbes actually has a list that projects that Stark Industries is worth $20.3 billion. Assuming that there's still 300 million shares available, that puts the stock price at $67.67, give or take, in 2011. And this actually seems quite accurate because in 2008, in Iron Man, there's a CNBC ticker that runs across the screen that says Stark Industries drops from a price of $82 down to $56.50. Since Tony says he's going to be shutting down the defense division of Stark Industries and focus on arc reactor technology. The stock price would definitely drop and likely take some time to recover because Stark Industries has to prove that they're going to be successful to shareholders as an arc reactor technology company. So with my previous assumption that Tony had 17% equity in the company, going from $9 to $67.67 means that Tony's value in the company would be worth $3.45 billion. And if he's handing off the CEO position, he would sell off a lot of that equity, which would go to Pepper Potts. So let's say he pockets $2.6 billion and keeps 4% because he's still somewhat the owner of the company and it's still his name on the wall. So this actually gets kind of cool, because Lockheed Martin's stock prices skyrocket over the most recent decade in our world. And since I've pinned Stark Industries to be similar to it, I think there's some reasonable assumptions to say that Stark Industries would also skyrocket in stock value, with Pepper Potts, who's very good at managing the company in power, and because Iron Man is continually showing off what he can do through his suits, there's a lot of demand being built for his arc reactor technology. So with Pepper in power, she takes the market capitalization from $20.3 billion in 2011 to $80.79 billion in 2018 during the time of Infinity Wars. That means that the stock price went from $67.67 to $269. And with Tony maintaining his 4% in the company, that takes his piece of the pie from $812 million to $3.2 billion by 2018. So that's one way that Tony's accumulated a lot of wealth and maintained a lot of it. So what are some of the other ways? The next would be real estate. So we see through the earlier Iron Mans that Tony has his Malibu penthouse, and that was valued at about $25 million. And even though it gets destroyed, there's probably a lot of insurance on that house, so I'm sure he's fine. Now, just prior to the Avengers, we see that Tony Stark is responsible for building Stark Tower.
How does it look?
Like Christmas, but with more me.
Which is estimated to be valued at about $600 million in Manhattan. Moreover, we see that he takes Stark Tower off the grid using his arc reactor technology, so he's not even paying the city to power his building. And that saves him a lot of money. But he doesn't live there for very long, considering we see that he's moving everything out, which is part of the plot of Spider-Man Homecoming in 2017.
Launch for intercept, green light, green light.
So let's assume that he's sold the building in 2016, 2017, and by that point, New York real estate would have valued the tower at about $726 million. So in 4 to 5 years, the building already increased about $126 million in value. So after selling Stark Tower, Tony and the Avengers are moved to upstate New York, of course, where they are housed at the new Avengers Compound or facility. The property is 100 acres and it used to be home to 6 storage facilities that were owned by Stark Industries.
Guys, we might have a problem. Didn't you say this was some old warehouse? It's not! You son of a bitch!
And as we can see in each of the films, it continually gets upgraded every time. And also, thank you Minutes Explains for some of these details and some of the information upcoming. Now, the facility is staffed by many past SHIELD agents, and I'm gonna have to read this here, but it's now used for scientific research, military training, weapons development, and of course the new Avengers program. Also, vehicles and aircrafts like the Quinjet are stored in a lot of the storage facilities, and there's all kinds of amenities and facilities like physiotherapy, a laps pool, a running track.
Don't say it! Don't you say it! Left! Come on!
For all of the staff who are housed there. Since S.H.I.E.L.D. doesn't really exist anymore and Pepper Potts is running as CEO of Stark Industries, I would believe that Tony Stark paid for this entire Avengers compound as well, and we can even see that here in this scene where Maria Hill calls Tony the boss.
Lab's all set up, boss.
Oh, actually, he's the boss. I just pay for everything and design everything and make everyone look cooler.
That means Tony owns all of the assets plus the compound, and I would value that to be at least $4 billion. Upstate New York is also a smart choice to put the facility because it's away from a lot of people, unlike in Manhattan, and property taxes would probably be a lot less. Also, like in Stark Tower, it's probably run all on clean green arc reactor technology anyways, so he'd be saving a lot of money to that extent in powering the whole facility. So another thing we can talk about is Tony Stark's assets. Now, one of the things that easily comes to mind is J.a.r.v.i.s and that artificial intelligence technology, and that was valued by Mashables, I believe, to be worth about $10 million. And we could probably double that for the Friday technology that he uses in his newer suits after J.a.r.v.i.s becomes part of Vision. It was also assumed that of Tony's vast car collection, that was probably worth about $3.4 million. Now, they also got exploded in the Malibu house, but again, insurance has that covered. So another thing I would count as an asset would be his Iron Man suits. And prior to Iron Man 3, they were valued at about $10 billion. Now, I would argue that it's worth a lot more than that now by the time we get to Infinity Wars, because He's up to his 50th iteration that we see in Infinity Wars, which is built out with all of the nanotechnology. Also, he's built the Spider-Man suit and others. I would say that his Iron Man suits are probably worth about $27 billion at this point. Something else that we can talk about is, because he's a genius and really good at everything, I'm sure that he has a good tax planning and investment team as well. I imagine that a lot of the money that he has, even though he obviously spends a lot of it, much of it is likely invested by a very good team, and he's probably making plenty of return on that, beating the market every year. But I have no real way to quantify that, so I'm gonna leave that. However, when it comes to tax planning, I think there's a lot that we could talk about here. I would bet that Tony Stark, even though he should be paying about 45% in income tax, I bet that he's paying a lot less. I'm sure that he's incorporated, which would allow him to write off substantial amounts of the expenses that he accrues, like all of his Iron Man technology and a lot of the other expenses of running the Avengers. Moreover, because a lot of his work is in research and development, I'm sure there are plenty of tax deductions and tax credits that he's able to get. So of course he's always focusing on sustainable green development energy as well, and he builds and develops and sells real estate. So there are tax credits and deductions that he's able to take advantage of then. He also probably has much debt that he takes on to invest a lot of these projects in, which gives him room to reduce some of his tax burden as well. You have to understand that taxes are easier on people who create economic productivity. And of course, based on all of these industries that Tony's working in, a lot of productivity and advancement is happening, so he can reduce a lot of the costs of the expenses to accomplish that. So to sum this all up, I would say that Tony Stark's probably worth about $35 billion by the time we get to Infinity Wars. Now, of course, he's an absolute genius and had multiple master's degrees by the time he was 19, but I think there's something to be learned from Tony Stark. You can build wealth from being a business owner or an entrepreneur. You can build wealth from real estate as well as investing. It's also worth owning valuable assets and effective tax planning. I don't believe you have to be a genius, billionaire, playboy philanthropist to be able to build wealth in your life. And I think that if you look at people who are successful like him, it's worth learning about the methods that they use to get to the wealth they have and how you can replicate that for yourself. So if you like this kind of more fun video that still is somewhat educational, then let me know, because I would be happy to create more of them. I hope you found it interesting, and I sure did. It took a lot more research than I really anticipated, but it was a lot of fun to dive into this. But if this video brought you value, then please give it a like and consider subscribing. Go enjoy your Marvel movies, and I'll see you probably in a few days because this video came out quite late. So with that, I'll see you later. Bye.